I'm Andrea Maurer, and this is Flying Under the Radar, a podcast about people building meaningful lives and doing creative work outside the usual spotlight. Each episode, we talk to someone who has bucked the usual prescribed recipe in order to live in a way that's true to who they are and the purpose they wish to serve in the world. In addition to inviting them to share their story, I also ask each guest the same 5 questions. Who saw you or saw something in you before you could see it in yourself? What almost stopped you? What did you have to stop believing in order to get where you are now? What did the day-to-day look like when the dream was still just a dream? And what pays the bills, what feeds your soul, and are those two the same thing? The last thing I ask of them is to give us one small doable thing that we can do this week in order for our lives to start feeling more like our lives. My guest today is Dawn Pier. Dawn is a surfer, an environmental scientist, and a writer. She's equally at home on a surfboard off Baja, Mexico's East Cape, as she is at a military radar station 437 miles from the North Pole. For about a decade, she spent every summer in the far north doing environmental research at old Cold War stations, from the Yukon-Alaska border all the way up to the tip of Ellesmere Island. Along the way, she ate musk ox, polar bear, raw walrus, and muktuk, but drew the line at a raw Arctic char eyeball. She also nearly peed herself when a grizzly charged a herd of horses a few feet from her tent. In 2002, she moved to southern Baja to chase her dream of learning to surf and co-founded a conservation nonprofit at Cabo Pomo that helped turn that park into the most successful marine protected area in the world and a UNESCO World Heritage Site. These days, she's an award-winning real estate agent. She keeps a serious yoga and meditation practice, is writing a memoir called Wavestruck, and lives near her favorite surf breaks with her 2 rescue mutts, Pila and Tula. Dawn and I have known each other for more than 15 years. We haven't met in person, but it is my sincerest hope that changes soon. If I had to describe Dawn with one word, it would be luminescent. After spending more than 20 years soaking up that bright Mexican sun, it appears that she is now radiating it. In this conversation, we get into the wave that knocked her flat and convinced her to learn to surf, the marriage she finally left, the toast from a work colleague that showed her who she really was, and the long, circuitous road from conservation biology to selling real estate. And just like every episode, Dawn leaves us with one small, doable thing we can try this week. Welcome, Dawn. Thank you so much for being here. I appreciate it more than you know. Tell me about your journey and about how you went from the Arctic tundra to tropical paradise.
Well, I'll start with saying thank you for having me, because it's an honor to be your very first guest here on Flying Under the Radar. The story really begins when I had a bit of an existential wake-up call, shall we say. A friend and colleague was killed in an avalanche doing his research, and I woke up truly to my mortality sitting in his memorial service, realizing that he had accomplished in his short 33 years more than most people accomplish in 3 times that much. And I felt like I was treading water, and there were a whole bunch of dreams and things I wanted to do, places I wanted to see, that were constantly getting put on the back burner. Add to that, I was also very unhappy in a marriage. I'd been with the same person since I was 17 years old, and at this point I was 30. So I left that memorial service with a plan of sorts, which was that I knew I needed to change things, that I needed to start living and not just putting off until some other time all the things I wanted to do. So yeah, that's how the big changes that I underwent that brought me to Mexico started. And it took me another almost 2 full years, a year and a half, to do the soul searching that was necessary to figure out what I needed to do, which was in the end, leave my marriage and head out on my own. That was probably in my life, that was the single most difficult thing I've ever done, was getting the strength and self-confidence to leave a marriage that had been part of my life since I was very young. Even though we married when I was 24, we had lived together since I was 18. I didn't know life without that person. And it was scary. And I thought I would be alone for the rest of my life, which at the time I thought was a fate worse than death. So I spent the next 18 months or so trying to get in touch with who I was and whether or not I could make our marriage work or not. The phrase that kept coming to me from friends and family was, well, marriage is hard. You just got to work at it. And so I kept working and working at it. And there came a point where I was like, is it supposed to be this hard? The thing that changed my life, aside from that memorial service, right around the same time, my back went out so badly that I was experiencing the worst sciatica. I couldn't stand up straight. This is like the beginning of a bad joke. A massage therapist, a cranial sacral therapist, and a chiropractor all walk into a bar, and they all say to Dawn, hey, Dawn, have you ever considered learning yoga? So that was clearly a message that I needed to learn yoga. This was in 1998, and yoga was not a big thing, especially in Eastern Canada where I was. This was in the spring, and there was a new beginner's class starting in the fall after I would get back from my research in the Arctic. So yeah, I got back from a summer away where I had some very interesting experiences and started to figure out that I was super happy being without my husband. It was the first summer that he was not with me on that trip. My husband and I actually worked together. This also complicated things tremendously. 1998 was the very first summer that he didn't go up to the field with me because he got a job as a teacher. I went to Ellesmere Island for the very first time. And it taught me a lot of things about myself. The most important one was that I felt lighter when I was on my own. I knew somewhere very deep in my soul that I should get out of my marriage, but I had very little self-esteem and I was too scared to leave him. So I didn't. But I started yoga that fall. And my very first yoga lesson, I left that studio feeling 2 inches taller and so at peace, so calm. Truly a life-changing event in one lesson. So I went back, and every time I went, I left there feeling better and better. My back got better. And gradually, the practice started to help me realize a level of calm I had never experienced before. At this point, I was a really bad insomniac. I couldn't fall asleep at night. My mind was racing all the time. Yoga started to make me sleep better. And then I took a meditation class that a Buddhist monk offered my yoga instructor for all of her students. And I jumped at that opportunity because I had tried to meditate once before, maybe more than once, but the time I remember most specifically, it was horrific. I closed my eyes and it was like somebody turned the volume up on a crazy person's brain. It was so overwhelming. They call it monkey mind. I called mine coked out orangutan brain. But I found that what was great was yoga, it turns out, is meditation in motion. And so it was sort of like my gateway drug to meditation. I found that more peaceful interior through yoga. And then I was able to sit down and actually meditate using a technique that the monk gave us, which was the simplest thing in the world, just counting to 21 over and over and over again. And the meditation combined with the yoga was truly mind altering and put me in touch with my soul. I'd been living in my head my whole life, and suddenly I was starting to go deeper. And it changed the dynamic in my marriage incredibly. I started actually hearing us. I became the witness. Instead of reactive, I started to witness our exchanges in a more objective way and realized how not great they were. how my husband was talking to me like I was a child a lot. It was critical for me to come to the conclusion that I needed to get out of that relationship. So eventually I did make that decision, but my self-esteem was so low. I built my self-confidence and self-worth up a little bit by having a couple of not true affairs, but just flings. And this speaks to one of your questions, which is the whole, who saw you? Who was it that saw you, that helped you make changes?
Who saw you before you saw yourself? No.
So this speaks specifically to that. When our team was about to leave, they were saying goodbye to us. The guy that I had had this fling with got up in front of everybody and he made a toast to me and said, "She's smiling all the time. She's been such a positive influence on the station and she's always smiling." And I was like, I am? That came as such a surprise to me. I didn't know I was walking around with a smile on my face when I was up north. And it was because I was on my own. I was the team leader, so I was calling the shots. I didn't have somebody looking over my shoulder, either my husband or my boss. And wow, that statement that I was this positive influence blew me away and made me really go, I know that I am not this happy person when I'm down south.
There really is a big difference between who I am up here and who I am down there. For the record, you do have $1 million smile. $1 million smile. So he was right, 100%. And you are a positive person. That's the only person I've ever seen. So I think he was spot on. I love that story. I think that's a great question because I think it's always one of those moments that changes you. It's empowering, I think. And sometimes we need that when we're not at our best, and knowing that somebody sees our strengths instead of all the weaknesses that we're sometimes prone to constantly reminding ourselves of.
I moved out at the end of 1999, right in time for the millennium. And that's when things really changed. I took a trip in February to Costa Rica, and that's where the dream to learn to surf was born. And that's where the name of my book comes from. Wave Struck being the impetus that created this dream. Surfing wasn't on my radar at all. I'm from Eastern Canada. I'm from Ontario, landlocked Canada. And I got about halfway through that trip. I didn't speak any Spanish. I ended up running into this woman who spoke pretty good Spanish, had the same itinerary as me. So we started traveling together. Partway through the trip, I finally slowed down and lay on the beach, feeling like a bloated polar bear. I was so white. I hadn't been in the sun in 10 years and started sweating like crazy. And so I jumped in the water. It was this beautiful bay in a place called Montezuma. And the ocean was flat. It looked like a lake. I swim out and I roll on my back and have this big flush of gratitude because I feel like this whole trip has been divinely orchestrated. And I offer up a prayer of gratitude and a few tears drop out. I swim back to the shore and I go to put my foot on the bottom of the ocean, and out of nowhere, a wave rises up and smacks me, like just takes me out. And I'm underwater going, blah, 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 full on washing machine treatment. Before I can come up for a breath, another wave comes and smacks me down again. And I'm literally doing somersaults. My back hits the bottom. It's like, it's chaos. And I'm under there going, what is happening? And I come up and I'm totally discombobulated. I've been pushed into shore. I stand up. There's a breeze floating across my ass because it's bare. My bottoms are down around my knees. I pull my bottoms back up. I'm like, oh my God. And there's like a tennis ball size of sand in my crotch now. So I get out of the sea and I'm pulling this sand out of my crotch. I'm literally knocked silly and I walk back to my towel and sit down. I'm totally discombobulated. But I'm checking in with myself and I'm like, what's this feeling? And it's like, I feel like supercharged because, of course, I've got this adrenaline rush going, right? I'm like, wow, that was powerful. And that's when I have my aha moment. The day before, I saw these two guys walking around with these surfboards and they were like, no shirts on. And all of a sudden, I put that image, these totally powerful looking young men with the power of the ocean next to it. And I go, oh, wow, that's why people surf. They're tapping into the power of the ocean. I want to get me more of that under controlled circumstances. But I said it out loud. I was like, I am going to learn to surf. And Maria looks at me. She's like, are you sure you didn't hit your head? Because like, who does that, right? Who makes the conclusion, I'm going to go out and play in that shit?
I've been knocked down by a wave multiple times. I've never come out of it and said, I think I'm going to learn to surf. So that's a pretty powerful aha. That's amazing.
It felt divine. And then I have to add, my conclusion was further reinforced the very next day. I went for a jog in the morning and I come up to this other little bay and I'm stop and I'm looking at the gorgeous view. And I hear this put, 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 put coming up to me. And it's this guy on a moped with a surfboard in the side rack. He gets off. And so I'm like, hi. And he's like, hey, how's it going? And so we start having this conversation and he ends up telling me he's from Alberta, Canada, and he moved to Costa Rica to learn to surf, fell in love, married a tika, And I was like, okay, I got the message. Like, what are the chances that I meet a guy from Alberta who moved to Costa Rica to learn to surf?
Crazy.
Yeah. So I went home and said, I'm moving to Costa Rica. And everybody, especially in my family, thought I was crazy and that it would never happen. And then one thing led to another. I came here to Baja California Sur with my sister because she wanted us to take a trip together before I moved to Costa Rica. And while I was here, we decided to get our scuba diving certification in Cabo Pulmo National Park. And I kept asking our dive instructor all these questions about the national park because I also figured when I was in Costa Rica, I was going to move there and volunteer in the national parks and camp on the beach and surf until somebody came along and said, we need a house sitter. And I figured I'd become a house sitter and eventually get a job working in the national parks. So I started asking my dive instructor all about the National Marine Park. Finally, he looks at me one day and goes, why are you asking me all these questions about the park? And I tell him what I just told you. And he's like, why are you going to go to Costa Rica? Volunteers are a dime a dozen there. You should come here. We need you. Well, so in January of 2002, I packed up my little pickup truck after I sold all my worldly possessions and I drove down here. And thus began the adventure of learning to surf and doing the conservation project that you mentioned in my bio at the beginning. And learning Spanish. I think back now and go, like, how audacious. I was so naive. But it's wonderful how ignorance allows us to try things and do things that we otherwise probably wouldn't do.
I just think that audacity comes from not knowing what you don't know to a certain extent, right? If somebody said, hey, I think you should move to a different country, you'd think long and hard about it because you're older and you've got experience. And so
and wiser, I hope.
Yeah, you know what you're getting yourself into, right? And so you didn't know what you didn't know, and that was the perfect catalyst. Tell me about the jump from conservation to real estate.
Circuitous is the word that comes to mind because it wasn't a straight line, that's for sure. I had to resign from being the director of the NGO that I co-founded. I had moved in with a new beau. He wanted me to quit being the director of the organization because he saw how hard it was on me. It was emotionally really difficult. And also, it was dangerous. I hit a cow on the way home one day, and he was really worried that something bad would happen at night where I hit a cow or horse or donkey. And so between what was going on with the organization and him, I decided, okay, I probably should change what I'm doing. He agreed to support me in my desire to follow my other dream, which was to become a writer. I took courses and I started my blog and just started playing. So that was an incredible period where I was surfing, writing, keeping house. I love to cook, so cooking for him was not a problem. So it was a really cool time, and that lasted for quite a while until I decided to leave him for all kinds of reasons. We moved to Maui. He decided, I want to move to Hawaii. And I said, I've never been to Hawaii. And we bought a big property on Maui. And I realized I loved Mexico more than I loved my boyfriend, and that he loved his lawnmower more than he loved me. And then all of a sudden I was on my own. And this is late 2011. And I was only making money from the vacation rentals I was managing, which was his. There wasn't that much income. He was paying me to manage his property here because he put it on the market and it hadn't sold yet. And in the meantime, this is like almost 2 acres of oceanfront property with 3 houses on it. And so it was a lot to manage. Not to mention, we also had 6 dogs between us. So my resources were getting stretched pretty thin. And it seemed like a natural progression from property management and vacation rental management to real estate. And I had this great house that I was managing that was listed, and the listing was about to expire. And I said to him, hey, can I have this as a listing? I also had cut my teeth a little bit on real estate because I helped him sell his house in the Bay Area before he bought the house on Maui. And then, of course, I was very involved in the process of buying the house on Maui. And he was an incredible negotiator. So he was like a masterclass in how to negotiate a sale. So I went to this little tiny brokerage, 2 existing, the broker and 1 agent. They were both surfers. And I said, hey, I have this great listing. Will you mentor me? Yeah, sure. Join us. And there was no need for licensing at that time. So boom, all of a sudden I'm a real estate agent with a $2-point-something million listing.
Bummer.
It did not sell for that, let me tell you. It sold for a lot less. But I had 1 listing, and then I got my second listing. And this is a critical part of the story. It actually goes back to one of your questions.
What pays the bills and what feeds your soul, and are they the same thing?
So at first, and for a really long time, I hated saying the words, I'm in real estate or I'm a real estate agent. To me, it was like, I had been a conservation biologist, for God's sakes, and now I'm selling real estate. It just seems so hypocritical. And I hate to say it, but you probably know this too. You know, real estate agents don't exactly have the greatest reputation at least in North America. You know, they all think we're a bunch of used car salespeople. I was embarrassed. I was actually ashamed to say that I was a real estate agent. I went kicking and screaming into this. But my very first sale really helped me to stick with it. And that's because this older gentleman asked me to list his lot. He had a lot right near where I'm sitting right now. I can't remember the exact number, but I think he wanted to ask $65,000 for it. And I was like, whoa, Ernie, no, this lot's worth way more than that. This is where the scientist in me came into play. I crunched the numbers. I did comparative market analysis for him. And I said, Ernie, I think you should list this for $95,000. He really doubted my rationality, but he went with it. And because I knew buyers were going to ask me, I said, so why are you selling? And he's like, well, me and my wife are getting up there in years. I need to liquidate this because I want to make sure my children don't have to pay anything when to bury me and my wife. And I was like, oh my God. So I list the property, and I kid you not, 8 days later, we have an offer. And he's blown away. And at the time, I did not realize just how miraculous this was. Today, I'd be like, whoa, wow, you definitely underpriced that lot. So even at $95,000, we probably could have listed it for more. But they made a lowball offer. And I went to him and said, look, we got an offer. And he's like, I'll take it. And I said, whoa, slow down. You can get more. And I got him more money. So we countered, and they took his counter. And so he ended up selling a lot for $85,000 that he was willing to give away for $65,000. And he was tickled pink. And the fact that I was able to help someone, he was really stoked, to use the parlance of a surfer. And that was my very first sale. And every time I doubted that there was any soul food in real estate, I reminded myself about that sale. That's how it began. And then I just, I built my business and went from that 3-person brokerage. I joined a great big brokerage and became the East Cape specialist. There's a very specific part of this that ties back into the whole meditation thing, which is in 2020, I was still in debt. I had $34,000 of credit card debt. I owed my sister $6,000 or something like that. And I was working my butt off and not realizing the kind of returns on my efforts that I was expecting. I would come home crying some days. And then the pandemic hit. And at the beginning of the pandemic, I joined a meditation group to do the Deepak Chopra 21-day abundance series, but with a difference. We didn't just do the meditation every day and then go back and share with one another. There was drawing and writing associated with the specific mantra of the day. For example, one of the things I did that I am convinced made all the difference in the world was I did this big drawing of abundance, which was a tree that literally had gold coins falling off of it. And my credit card statement with a 0 balance on it, and a big bag of gold coins under that tree, and an IOU with a big paid written on it with my sister's signature on it. We were manifesting abundance, and boy, did I. My mom passed away April 16th of that year. And on Mother's Day, I was negotiating 2 different offers. I'm working on Sunday, and one of the offers comes back signed. I'm stoked. I've just sold a super condo in town. And the other one was a lot that was my listing right next door to Ernie's lot. And the seller insisted that we counter a 3rd time. And I said to him, I'll write it up, but I don't think they're going to accept it. So I wrote it up. He signed it. We sent it off. And the email came back really fast. And I expected it to be like, I'm so sorry, but apparently we can't come to an agreement. No, click, was signed. And when I saw that they had accepted his counter offer, I had literally a full body experience and a vision. My mom had just passed. My dad had passed 4 years earlier. they both appeared in my mind's eye, smiling. And it felt very much that they had given me this gift. That was the beginning of my business exploding, because during the pandemic, everybody realized, whoa, life's short. You know that property we've been talking about buying in Cabo? Let's go.
Yeah. Which brings me back. You just said life's short. And this whole time I've been thinking, if I take you back to that person that was sitting at that memorial service of your friend that had died, and that person who had lived a life in such a short time that inspired you to get busy living. If you went back to that moment, if you could have seen then where you are now, would you say to yourself, mission accomplished?
Oh, absolutely. No question about it. Yeah, I've prioritized doing the things that I've wanted to do. When I turned 50, I was still in debt. And I said, I have to do something to celebrate this milestone. I'm going to France. I have wanted to go to France my whole life, and I hadn't been there yet, because the other thing I tend to do is I tend to throw myself into things that require a lot of commitment and a lot of responsibility, limit my freedom. And even though freedom is a thing I've always felt I needed, and any sort of limitation on my freedom makes me crazy, I was like, I'm going to Paris on a shoestring. When it came to those moments of, should I do this or should I not do this? It was always do the thing that if you die next week, you won't have any regrets.
Love that. That's amazing. That's awesome. Okay, so back to the question of what pays the bills and what feeds your soul, and are they the same thing? I know that you do a lot. I know you surf still. I know you write. You're writing a memoir, as we noted in your bio, but does real estate feed your soul? I sense that it does a little bit.
Yeah, you know, it's not the kind of soul food that creativity gives me, but I get the soul food from the human interaction. You know, the biggest thing that stopped me from leaving my husband was the fear of being alone for the rest of my life. First off, that didn't happen. I've been in multiple partnerships, one that lasted as long as 7 years. It's not the kiss of death that I thought it would be. And I find that's maybe the most ironic thing of all, is that I was so scared to be by myself because I had such low self-esteem and lack of self-love that the idea of being by myself scared the shit out of me. And now I love being by myself. I need human interaction, and I get it from my job.
Right.
And I get it on the beach and in the surf. So it does feed my soul in that sense. And the other thing is I've also brought conservation into it. So I've taken away that sense of guilt by, first off, joining Futuro Cabo del Este in Spanish, which is East Cape Futures, which is a sustainable development NGO that Legacy Works Group based in the United States helped create. We're bringing all sorts of players together. We're bringing together the developers, the real estate agents, the concerned citizens, the conservation organizations, the technology people. We're bringing atmospheric water generation people to these conferences that we're holding. Dream number whatever is to have my own house. So I'm going to build right near where I'm sitting right now, but it's closer to the ocean. I've discovered living where I am right now, where I'm 300 yards from the ocean. I know that sounds ridiculous, but I need to be closer. I need to feel it. I need to feel the waves.
This is a part that I wouldn't wish on anybody, really, honestly.
So yeah, I'm going to build a house using sustainable materials as much as humanly possible. So for example, instead of building with concrete block, which is the material typically used in Mexico, I'm going to use something called compressed earth block, which uses 25% the amount of water. It does not generate toxins like cement does. The other two ingredients are local earth that has a certain amount of clay and lye. It's solid. So you actually can use a lot less steel in your construction because they are going to hold the house up. So that's the other way that I'm feeding that part of the conservation part of my soul is fed by my promoting this kind of building to my clients who are buying lots from me.
What did you have to stop believing in order to get where you are now?
I had to stop believing that I was going to be miserable by myself. First, I thought I would be by myself for the rest of my life because I thought no one would ever love me. That's how low my self-esteem was. And secondly, I had to realize that I'm pretty good company.
I've had that conversation with a couple of other people. And this question about what you have to stop believing, this is sort of the head domino. It's like when you stop believing that you have to have this thing that you think you have to have and embrace the fact that you don't have it and that you're okay in that regard, it just changes everything. Part of what you and I always talked about were the relationships and wanting that so badly and compromising things that you didn't necessarily want to compromise to get it. Is that fair?
Oh, totally fair. And if I can add to the whole who saw you, there's multiple parts to that. But a big one was a guy on the beach who turned to me and said, Dawn, I think you might be codependent. Have you ever read anything by Melody Beattie? And I kid you not, over a year before this, I had a psychic reading and the psychic said to me, Melody Beattie, does that mean anything to you? And I was like, no. She goes, write it down. It's really important. The book being Codependent No More by Melody Beattie. And boy, was that a mind blower.
Okay, what almost stopped you?
The thing that was most difficult was leaving my husband. And what almost stopped me was a lack of belief in myself, self-esteem in the toilet. And the cure for that was yoga and meditation.
It's the inner stuff, right? My answer to the question was that critical voice, that disbelief in myself. And for me, action is what cures all of it. You prove yourself wrong. You prove that voice wrong and you do it.
That voice, for me, had multiple sources. The voice in my head had different personalities and still does. And what meditation helped me do was to recognize whose voice it was. So at first it was, oh, that's my husband's voice. And he stayed with me long after I left him. His voice was in here criticizing and telling me, oh, there you go again. And then sometimes it was my father's voice, again, being critical. And sometimes there was this beautiful divine voice that was loving and calm and gentle. I wrote about this in one of my Substacks, which was my wedding day experience with having the two, like the angel and the devil on my shoulders. And I didn't know who it was, but that calming, beautiful voice, I think, is the divine me. It's an angelic force. It's a beautiful sound. Their voice is so beautiful and loving. If I meditate or do whatever it takes to be grounded, surfing is a meditation, by the way, that voice is present more than the other less pleasant ones if I'm doing the things I should be doing.
Sounds to me like you meditate through physical activity because the yoga helps you focus on your body, get out of your head, and the surfing does the same thing for you.
Yeah, both of them require single pointed focus, which is where our creativity comes in, right? We're literally tapping into the divine because you have to be fully present in order to create a work of art.
The act of creating art itself gets you there. So you need it to do it, but it also is a conduit for it as well. Because when you immerse yourself in creating art, everything goes away and you reach that flow state. Now, not all of it is like that. I've done plenty of art where it feels like work.
And surfing too, there are Yeah, there are days when I'm not in the flow state either, and I wipe out, and I broke a bunch of ribs because I was not in the flow state. Surfing's the same. If you're really present, I mean, and you see professional surfers, there's a reason they put their headphones on. They go into this single-minded focus before they go out to compete. It's so important.
I was watching some of those videos on Instagram that you posted last weekend from that event that you were part of. And I've seen surfing before, but this was on what looked like smaller waves, and it almost looked like they were dancing on the board. It was so beautiful. It was just like this complete one with the ocean. I loved it.
So that's longboarding. Longboarding is a completely different animal. Most people see the swoosh slash, that's shortboarding. And longboarding is the original type of surfing, is just like you said, it's dancing on a wave. I think all surfing is dancing on a wave. It's just whether or not you're dancing to a punk or a hardcore metal song or to some jazz. Longboarding is hard. I can't longboard like those surfers. I took a lesson last year from one of our local longboarding coaches, and I was like, whoa, this is a completely different sport. One of the things about surfing that's so amazing is there's so many different ways to do it. It's perfect for somebody like me who gets bored easily. You can't get bored. There's different waves, there's different boards, there's different styles.
That's awesome. Okay, let's see. What did the day-to-day look like when the dream was still a dream?
Oh boy. When the dream was still a dream, before the dream was even born, I was a scientist working insane hours. In the winter, I was going to the office and sitting in front of a computer with one break for lunch. I would usually go for a run or something, but I was literally glued to my computer, and then I would go home as late as possible because I was avoiding my husband. So I would go home, eat too much, drink too much because I was self-medicating with wine, and then walk my great big Rhodesian Ridgeback dogs and go to bed. That was what it was. And then in the summer, I'd be gone for weeks and months at a time up in the Arctic, talk about soul food. I loved traveling in the Arctic, but it was long hours. We were working 80 hours a week.
You said something earlier in the conversation about how everybody just said, well, marriage is hard and you have to work at it. And you just described that, the day to day. You came home from work, you were working, you were coming home, you were eating, you were drinking, you were going to bed. You're just kind of going through the motions of your life. And
asleep.
Yes, this whole sleepwalking idea. And all the while, there's something in you that's saying, this isn't right. This isn't how you're supposed to be living. This isn't right. And I think a lot of people just keep eating and drinking and just keep going through the motions and just keep telling them there's not something wrong with my life. There's something wrong with me. And I think when you move from that existence to living the dream, so to speak, there's still work. You're still working your ass off, but it feels right. That question, what did the day-to-day look like? It looked like the day-to-day drudgery, right?
Yeah. And it wasn't even 9 to 5. It was like 9 to 7. We bought this great house, and I thought that was another one, the old carrot on a stick. I bought into that whole thing of get married, buy a house, have a mortgage, white picket fence, have babies, and life will be golden. We bought the house, and I literally bought the house thinking, once we have a house, I'll be happy.
I'll be happy when?
Yeah, I'll be happy when we have a house and I can garden. The house was a huge responsibility and it was always messy. It was just another thing on my plate that I couldn't handle. It became another weight or another millstone around my neck.
The work doesn't go away when you're living the dream, but the feeling like you're just working for no apparent reason and you're disconnected from what it's all about. I think that's really what the spirit of that question is. The other thing about a messy house that comes to mind is it would just drive me crazy if it wasn't clean. When I'm doing what I want to do, if my house is a mess, I don't really care. Obviously, at some point I clean it up, but it's not like I'm focusing on fixing things on the outside or making things on the outside look perfect or be perfect so that it will flow inside. It's the opposite direction.
Yeah, and learning that is so critical. You mentioned reason. And here's the thing, that even now, when from the outside looking in, I appear to be living this dream life, there are days when it's tough. Real estate isn't easy, it's a lot of work, and you can go a long time without closing a deal. I keep those reasons front of mind, like writing my book, same thing. Why am I doing this? This is an important part of this that I hope people will hear. It has taken me forever to get to the point now where I am willing to share some of it, and where I feel like I can see the light at the end of the tunnel. I know I still have years before it's actually publishable, literally, but I'm going to have something I can present to an agent by the end of this year. That's my promise to myself. I would not still be working on this if I had lost connection with the why. I'm doing it because I think my story will resonate with other people who are maybe experiencing similar things in life and just need to know that they're not the only one who had that horrible experience or made that really stupid choice. As human beings, we need to know we're not alone.
Yeah.
This book is woman-centric in many ways, and which is ironic because I rejected my femininity for so much of my life. This is something I want to share with other women. The whole, you don't have to buy into society's dictates that say, get married, have babies, be a good wife. No, there are other options. Maybe that is what will fulfill you. Maybe that's going to be your dream. All the power to you. But if you're bucking against it, maybe you need to look at why and whether or not there's something else that will both fulfill you and allow you to make your greatest contribution while you're on the planet.
Mm-hmm. That's perfect. Okay. One small doable thing that you can pass on to others. One small easy thing this week that somebody can start. If they feel inspired by you and say, gosh, she's living the dream, I want to live that. Something is just really calling to them. Just one small doable thing.
And people are not going to want to hear this, I don't think, but it's meditation or yoga or some sort of meditation. And like you said, meditation in motion. I couldn't do sitting meditation at first. But take, even if it's just 10 minutes to just tap into source. And you don't have to believe in God to do this, guys. There is an energy inside of us, the source of which we could debate for hours. But by getting quiet and tapping into that power that we have inside us, life changes. Your brain will change. Your way of interacting with other people will change. And it only takes 10 minutes. It changed my life.
There you go. I love it.
Excellent.
Dawn Pier, thank you so much for doing this. It's been an amazing conversation. I think this will be very motivating and very inspiring to a lot of people. I appreciate your time.
It's been a blast. Thank you so much for having me.